I want to talk about plinths. I know, it's a really bad way to start a YouTube video. Look at this block. Let's talk about that. But the reason I want to talk about plinths is to get at something I touched upon in my Art is Not for Empathy video. I want to get at more explicitly what I think art is for. The plinth will do that. Just bear with me. Plinths are weird. Think about being an Egyptian thousands of years ago and somehow carving the block that a statue sits on. Oddly enough, it would take a huge amount of skill and time, and yet it is arguably mostly invisible. It serves to lift up that statue, rather than being a noteworthy element of the design. The relative invisibility of something that requires so much labor is why the Great Design podcast calls itself 99% invisible. A well-designed thing, like a plinth, does not attract attention to itself, but serves a greater purpose. Humans have been making plinths and design objects that function as plinths for a long time. Think about what they do. They lift something up. If you are standing in a crowd of people and someone needs to make a statement to the group, what do? They stand on a chair, or get lifted up on shoulders, or hop on some sort of soapbox. Since humans are visual, we look to things that stand out. Even think about what I just said, stand out. This is how the eye works. It's a mapping sensory organ that is a primary means of navigating both geographic reality and the reality of interpersonal social realms. But as I will hopefully prove in this video, we also use our eyes to navigate metaphysical reality. The plinth is the way we tend to make things stand out because humans have decided that some things are noteworthy and everyone needs to see them. Today we do this with more than just plinths. We do it with shoutouts, influence peddlers on Instagram, hashtags and search engine optimization, TV talking heads, etc. In this day and age, we even have a term called platforming. It's the same thing as a plinth. After all, a plinth is a platform. The existence of a plinth begs a question though, and hopefully you can see what I'm trying to get at from this question. What is worthy of platforming, or what is worthy of standing on a plinth? My previous video was combating the idea that art was for empathy. This idea is trying to tackle the question whether folks are doing so intentionally or not. Their answer is simply, artwork that increases our empathic capacities is artwork that is worthy of a place on the plinth. Ellen Winner, in her book, shows that if we are only going to platform art that increases our empathic capacities, we're kind of in trouble because it seems like no art really does that. So, what do I think should be put on the plinth? What is art for? Art is for truth. I know. What is truth? I'll get to that. First, though, I'm not alone in thinking this. Malcolm Guite starts his book, Lifting the Veil, with a strange claim. He says that imagination is a truth-bearing faculty. I think it's easy to skip over this sentence, but take a moment and think about the absurdity of that claim. Most rational folks would easily dismiss this claim. Art doesn't tell truths, but rather it tells stories. Stories in the lying sense, like what Plato said about art back in antiquity, and what Madeleine L'Engle talks about in her book, Walking on Water. Works of fiction are not made of fact, but they are made of fancy. I think most would say that art in general, from paintings to poems, works in the realm of the fanciful rather than the factual. So what is Guite after, especially in an age where truth is suspect? Most people wonder, what is truth? Not only do we wonder what truth is, but doesn't it make the most sense that reason is the truth-bearing faculty, not the imagination? Isn't it more accurate to say that imagination is an amusement-bearing faculty? After all, science, a rational practice, leads to observation of factual understandings of reality. Certainly, we may never know moral truths, philosophical truths, or even if our universe is some grand simulation, but we can find factual truths about this reality we find ourselves in. Yet, I cannot let go of what Guite is saying. It sticks with me on a deeper level than the factual. If you read his book, which it's a modest tome with lots of pictures, it's like less than 100 pages, you'll see that he is not getting at truth in the same manner as facts. Even still, an artwork can contain facts. Monuments, after all, contain some degree of fact, though contemporary audiences have rightly pointed out that often they conveniently, or not so conveniently, leave out many of the facts. The kind of truth that Geit is getting at is not factual statements, but at metaphysical truths. I can quickly demonstrate it through a metaphor, such as, time is like a river. No, it's not. A river is a stream of water moving downhill via the force of gravity until it finds a level place to pool. Time doesn't do that. Time is in fact a huge mystery and might be an illusion, so what is the lie, that is the metaphor, getting at, if it is not getting at facts? Does it carry a truth? The metaphor works on the level of an embodied human experience, as in, the experience of time for a human is similar to the experience of a river. No matter what the human does, the river keeps flowing, the water keeps passing, and the best we can do is temporarily slow it via a dam. Joyful or intense moments, often called flow states, are how we dam up time for a little bit. So it is not factually true that time is like a river, but it is metaphorically true, and it helps us humans understand some part of time in a true manner, albeit incomplete. This is what Geit is after. The imagination is used to see unseen connections and meanings. This does not mean that all imagined things are true, though. After all, the Nazi propaganda was first imagined and then actualized, which told the lie that Jews and other groups were best seen as metaphorical vermin. Which brings me back to plinths. How do we know which products of the imagination are worthy to stand on a plinth? The plinth is where we put the things that deserve to be higher and more visible, platformed, if you will. Well, let's take a look at some art. After all, I think art can help with this. This is the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square in London, not the upside-down one. That is an artwork by Rachel Whiteread. Whiteread has a very clear modernist influence in these forms and materials. Often, she works in concrete or plaster and fills a mundane space. I love the staircases personally. Here are the facts. This is the negative space, the air, of a staircase. If this was what Geit was getting at, it would be hard to call that imagination. What Whiteread did that was imaginative was not filling the staircase with cement. It was realizing that filling the staircase with cement might mean something, that there is an invisible space through which we ascend, and yet don't really see that space at all. It is practically, as in practicality, invisible. Her imagination turns it on its side and makes us confused about orientation. Is this a staircase in its own right? What does it mean? The space that you use to move up and down is made physical, and in order to do that, it has to be made unaccessible to the stair climber. She's also turning that space on its head, perhaps hinting that when the stairs are unable to be climbed, you need to find another way up. Isn't that true? Isn't that why human beings are evolutionarily speaking niche switchers? That is the sneakiness of the contemporary artist, turning things on their heads to reveal a hidden truth in what we already think we know. Take a look at the plinth on the plinth in Trafalgar Square more closely. It's an inverse plinth made of translucent resin on top the original. Certainly this is just pure foolishness. Or is Geit onto something? What truth does this hold? I think in order to understand what Whiteread is getting at, we need a better understanding of what this plinth is. It's not just a plinth for her upside-down one to sit on. The fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square is a place where monuments of the factual manner usually, or traditionally, would stand. Yet, on this plinth, there have been a series of rotating sculptures made by artists all over the world. Rather than permanence, it's an exploration of rotating imaginative perspectives. This one is one of my favorite sculptures that was featured on the plinth. Ecce Homo by Mark Wallinger. A simple and plain, unassuming man with a crown of barbed wire thorns and hands loosely tied behind his back. It's a strange likeness of Jesus Christ, one that is far more factual than most, and yet also a fiction. On the factual side of things, it's life-sized instead of monumental. It is falsely ambiguous, as it is hardly any single person depicted, but perhaps that actually makes it more factual than depicting an individual as Jesus. It certainly doesn't hold up to the monumentality of the other sculptures in the square, yet it stands out like a sore thumb. On the one hand, it largely minimizes the figure of Christ. On the other hand, the imagination, the audacity of Wallinger to take such a large plinth and place such a small man on it, it's ridiculous. Yet, regardless of whether you believe the claims of Christianity to be true, is it that far off from the truth, the historic truth? Christianity claims that there is a whole wide world and God sent his only son to some backwater town born in a barn to change the world. The historic fact is that this one man has had a more than 2,000-year impact on the entire globe, much like the impacts of other religious leaders. The singular life need not be a conquering Alexander or Caesar or Khan. It seems a humble man can calmly change the tide of the entire planet. Contrary to Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, Ecce Homo proclaims the power of Christ not through monolithic splendor, but humility. Wallinger's audacious imagination gets at this truth. It's not a complete picture of the truth, obviously, but his imagination was the faculty that carried it out for us to see. It's a truth wrapped up in both fact and fiction, a presentation of something unknown wrapped in a way that we could receive it and notice it. Otherwise, we'd be prone to reject or neglect the truth that an individual human being can have a monumental impact on the world. Which brings me back to White Reed's rendition atop this strange plinth. She is showing us something, an invisible plinth that is upside down. Or is it right side up? There's a force out there that has this world on a plinth. This world is a sculpture that keeps changing and is filled with life and death. This plinth, the fourth one in the square, is like the center of the universe, as my friend Mike Rippey said about it in one of our scapegoat videos. White Reed reveals the truth about the idea of this plinth. The plinth is a place where we test monuments. We test them to see if their fixed claims to facts and fancies are worthy, or if they are absurd and narrow-minded. The world needs a place where we test artworks to see how true they are and if they help us live better lives. This is why we have galleries and social media feeds, museums and theaters. We are all searching for information on how to navigate the world. The artwork is a way for us to test our different ideas in order to decide what is true. White Reed shows us that the mere existence of a plinth is hinting at what the ultimate center of the universe is. Her imagination somehow realized into space and time the fact that at the end, at the center, humans are searching for what is ultimately true. The plinth is a place where we hold up things that help us in this searching for meaning. And that is what art is for.